I still wonder about the human matter of returning. Now, this is a larger question. It's a political philosophical question. Um, but what I start with in more detail is that a kind of a glaring empty space that was left at the end of our conversation, which is, of course, that there is no resurrection of the body for the ancients, nor let's say a last judgment. And I asked whether there's any equivalent in Plato to a New Jerusalem.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
yes, and so well, there you could think of certain things, but I think at the most they point in the same direction, but they're not. They're certainly not. The likeness is vague at best. And so then I asked to returning to. Sorry.
Let us stop at the first point, yeah? So we
Sure.
can explore the first before we go to something else. Do you have some initial thoughts about that, Chris? You wish that I address it first?
About the resurrection for Plato.
The body, no,
for resurrection in Plato.
No eschaton, universal eschaton.
No, well, the myth of is sort of at the end of the Republic is sort of kind of like the final statement in Plato. And I mean, I know Plato's dialogues end with the laws, but I've always thought of the myth of as sort of this deliberately placed mystery. It's sort of as far as Plato or Socrates can bring themselves to making any kind of ultimate statement about the topic of the afterlife, I say, in parallel with our theme. And to me, I always remember when I first read the Republic at the age of 20 or so, thinking to myself as an incipient Christian that, or an insipid Christian, that that it was significant that that Socrates broke form to enter into a narrative mode, to address something like the afterlife. In other words, there's only so far that didactic, explanatory, not to say pedantic, but descriptive philosophical inquiry can bring us to understanding something as broad and expansive as the afterlife. So he goes into a myth, and he goes into a story, and the story is not necessarily intended to be interpreted literally. The story is there as a kind of riddle, even to the one who is stating it, as something the best he can do to, as it were, paint a painting of what the afterlife may be, given all that occurred beforehand. Because the thing about the afterlife, primarily, is that it is that thing which is completely unknowable by we who are living. Correct? I mean, it's, well, in a sense, because we have glimpses of it. We can know it at a distance, but we can't know it the way someone who has gone to the afterlife, per se, can know it. We can't know it the way, well, unless you could there could be caveats to that, but we can't know it the way, you know, that Christ, who sits at the right hand of the Father, could know it, or Mary, the Mother of God, after the Assumption, could know it, who intercedes for the communion of saints who abide up above, or the seraphim who sing sleeplessly before the throne of God the Father can know it. The afterlife, quote unquote, I mean, it's curious that we even call it the afterlife, as if it were something afterlife and this were life, when in fact the afterlife is the true life, and this is a kind of proto-life that we are living now before we can enter into a life that is more fully life.
Maybe we are in the afterlife now.
So we are it's like, it's sort of a misnomer to call it the afterlife. That's entirely just a product of our stance here on Earth, on this crumbling little planet in outer space, that is so beset with toil and tribulation, and the spirits that roam the air, or the devil that roams about devouring souls. We right now are in a kind of purgatorial state. I always think we, like the demons, and in Christian theology and Catholic theology, the demons were, Lucifer was cast down, and in a way, hell doesn't really exist fully yet. In that, and that understanding that hell is right here with us, the demons are right here with us. If we had true vision to see the spiritual world as it courses among us, we would live in a state of total terror and fright all the time. It's only by God's grace that we have been rendered deaf and dumb to the spiritual world here and now, because these things are ungodly, hideous, marred, angelic beings, which like you look on YouTube of anybody who can bear testimony of some kind of occultic experience of these things, which I have done, and take it for whatever you take it. And there can be contradictions, and you can say, oh, well, that's just one person's experience. But I really do believe, after what I have heard from people, even people in my real life that I know personally, that these things exist, and that they're utterly terrifying, and that they seek our utter demolition and demise. It's not so much that these things want us to love and worship evil, as they want us to abandon God. They don't care the devil doesn't care if we worship him. Ultimately, he only cares that we abandon God and we abandon hope. That's why in Dante's Inferno, what does it say above the entrance? Abandon all hope, ye who enter here.
There's so much on the stove there, Chris. You brought a lot on the stove. Dante does not say abandon all hope. He does not say that. There is a term, a cognate to abandon. His Florentine Italian, whatever you want to call it, that's not his term. It is best translated as let go. Now, however, modern translators, will not understand let go. Why let go? It sounds better, to say abandon. That makes more sense. Because we are to have that hope. But the problem is that the poetic context of that statement add to that the source of that statement suggests another message. And the context that I just referred to associates hope to fear of losing it and suspicion. Dante's recovering a hope that is, shall we say, rational, a rational hope. Not a hope in the face of despair, a hope that might lead to despair, a hope that as a mask of despair, but a rational hope that is allied to desire and not to suspicion, to doubt, a desire that is inseparable from the doubt that accompanies him and us through a whole hierarchy of appearances. So, in fact, now to the second point, who is speaking? This is a message on the door, and it's a kind of door that we are given to understand is a door of law. This is a very stern law, a a law that admits no reasoning. There is various word games in that whole
Mm.
from the law.
I'm understanding you. I'm understanding you.
And this is it's dura lex, yeah, dura. It's hard because it does not see you in the face. And this law that we will see again in a later passage of Inferno, represented by Mohammed, Maometto, the prophet of Muslims, who comes about damning almost, yeah, Dante's posture. Dante had a posture of contemplation. He sets himself up on a sort of a cliff and looks down, contemplating, and then Muhammad comes about and says, in effect, what in the hell are you doing there? How dare you? You know, you're not supposed to do this. And Virgil comes along and he's able to mesmerize and neuter, in effect, neutralize Muhammad's objection. And then, thanks to Virgil, good old Virgil, Dante is able to go ahead, undisturbed by the Islamic objection to philosophy. So, okay, that's as far as Dante is concerned. Who is knowing what? If the living are trying to know the dead, of course they can know it. By definition, know the dead as living, because the dead are not of the same order. However, the situation is not all that clear if we see that the living and the dead are not two different entities, after all. And platonically speaking, all knowledge being, we say metaphorically also perhaps, recollection, it might be that as we know, the knower is recollecting himself, not as something other than the dead, but in fact, he is recollecting himself as the one who knows ultimately. No? I mean, we know that the medievals speak of metaphysics as the science of God. Okay. Who knows? Who is it that knows? St. Paul asks a similar question. He says, well, or invites a similar question when he refers to the Logos as being the one who lives, yeah? Who lives in him, and he in the Logos. And then one may ask, well, who is speaking then? If it is the Logos, not I who live, but the Logos who lives in me, then who is speaking? Is he just guessing, surmising it? Or who is speaking out? Is the Logos? Is it not the Logos that is speaking in him? Is that not a reasonable inference that we could or should entertain? Okay. As long as we pose problems in terms of, yeah, here and there. Chris, you said, well, the afterlife, what is that? Yeah, of course, of course. But why not the afterlife being, in fact, after you put your mask down? And that is afterlife. That is the life that is here. You know, as long as you cling to your mask, yes, the mask as in that, also the farce, right? The Hollywood comedy. You know, after you take it off, then you find that, that's it. That's very effective, by the way, against the boogie viruses. That's effective too. So, okay. Now,
Yes, ma'am.
so there we have one problem, namely the question of the knower. It is easy to say, I cannot know something, then, but Plato, among others, of course, raises the question, what is this I that knows? Yeah? And of course, if you already presuppose that you are living as opposed to being dead, and that there is some kind of a wall, a barrier between the two, then you've already set the stage for the answer you're looking for. No, you cannot know. Kant, Immanuel Kant, sets his stage. Hegel sets his stage, and Plato shakes the stage. Okay? Now, second point, Chris, you raised pertains to the limitations of the logos, the philosophical logos, dialogue. What is knowledge? Is knowledge something, fixed, something that we're used to? Yeah, I know the formula X. Yeah?
Vis-a-vis your note to all of us in the email prior to this video call, that we be, I forget how you put it, being courageously prudent, something like that. I think that, for one thing, relates to your deceptively academic nitpick about abandonment versus letting go, which I don't think is a nitpick at all, but is actually a pivot point that needs to be attended to, because that I'm beginning to grasp. But the other thing related to all that I'd like to share now is the notion in Catholic terminology or Christian terminology of the kingdom of heaven. What I wanted to say specifically, because Christ in the Gospels does not specifically talk about heaven as a place to bound up and play a harp on a cloud. He speaks of the kingdom of heaven, and frequently this is discussed as something, the kingdom of heaven is something that is landing on earth. I don't quite know what that means, but the thing I want to say is that in the Rosary, in the mysteries of the Rosary, there are 5 different types of mysteries. There's the sorrowful mysteries, there's the joyful mysteries, the glorious mysteries. But the mysteries that I always love the best are the ones traditionally said on Thursday. They're the luminous mysteries. And the thing about the luminous mysteries is they are the mysteries of the things of God that God had no necessity to have done for our salvation, but did anyway, as the psalmist says, my cup overfloweth. That the goodness of God extends not just to the point of saving us and giving us what we need to avoid hell and to attain to the kingdom, but he actually overflows our cup in this luminous way, luminosity. And so the luminous mysteries are the baptism of the Jordan, the wedding at Cana, the preaching of the kingdom, the transfiguration in the Eucharist. But the one that comes to mind here in this context is the preaching of the kingdom, which is a curious thing, especially in an Anglophonic world, very much influenced by Protestant thought, that the preaching of the kingdom of heaven and all the parables, the tale of the Good Samaritan, the tale of the sower who goes out and the vineyard, all of that is luminous in a sense. That and the very preaching of the kingdom is a luminous mystery. In other words, it's, if insofar as that aligns with some kind of knowledge of the afterlife, such a thing is a luminous thing. It's for our greater nourishment and flourishing, but it's not something that was essential in a bare bones way. It's something that is given as pure, unadulterated cream atop the Slurpee. However you want to put it. It's a terrible way to put it, but I understand. So anyway, so to your
Sweet.
point now, to try to tie it back and give you a segue to continue, knowledge being a fixed thing. Well, the fixed thing, and now what I'm saying would be the fixed thing is our salvation, would be having the guardrails in place, the ladder rungs in place, for our salvation. That would be the fixed. That's a certain fixed dimension of theological knowledge, of tutoring in the things of goodness and of philosophy and of God. The knowledge of, but then there's this other kind of knowledge which is luminous, which has a connection, has this kind of mysterious. That's why it's called a mystery. It has a mysterious connection to the other parts, to the more fixed types of knowledge, but is of its own nature something that cannot be grasped at, but must simply be accepted, must be accepted as a thing that is lavished upon us. You're muted right now, Marco.
Yes, yes. Is again, knowledge a matter of grasping? You know, there is this this old Buddhist scriptures way of speaking, so indicating that the whole problem of the human being resides in a compulsion to grasp. And people always try to grasp. Well, this is tied clearly to this point of reference that tries to grasp. Bringing here, I grasp knowledge, I have knowledge, and then the discussions systematically point to this unpacking of the point of reference, of the grasping. This I who grasps is an illusion, we're said. It is not, but it is not. And they have this strange way of putting it. We don't want to say that it's the negation, but neither is it the affirmation. Neither affirmation nor negation.
Sorry, the grasping is?
The grasper.
The grasper.
The grasper. The one who grasps.
The grasper is not the negation, nor is he.
No, I mean, the point of the discussion is neither to affirm it as being there, nor to negate it. So the question is, I mean, if you look at it platonically, Socratically, the question is not whether God is there or not, but the question is the nature of the divinity. Yeah? So clearly the Buddhist writings, looked at phenomenologically, suggest that the point is not to affirm or to negate things, and thus to grasp an answer, but to open up the entity that is given as an answer, to open up the answers and discover the questions underlying it.
Can I tell a Buddhist joke real quick? It might lighten the mood, might help. I love this little joke. Just a little story. It's a Zen parable. It goes, there was a Zen master who went into a little tavern one time, and the service was terrible. The staff was distracted. Everything was dusty and grimy. He couldn't get the attention of the bartender. He was waiting there. He was hungry. He was thirsty. He'd just come from a long journey. Eventually, he gets some, bowl of miso soup, a little sake. The stuff has hairs in it. It's cold. It's lukewarm. The sake is diluted. After he finishes, he leaves like a 20,000, whatever, like a $200 tip, and a big tip for the staff. And after he leaves, they look at it, and they're shocked that after all that, this guy gave such a lavishing, wonderful tip for this terrible service. The next day, he returns, and They see him through the window. They say, "Oh, there's that Zen master coming again." They mop the floors. They clean the countertops. They put everything in order. By the time he enters the doorway, he's treated like the King of England. Yes, sir. Right this way, sir. Please, sir. What would you like? The same thing or something better, sir? Here's the menu, sir. He gets the same exact thing. This time it arrives in a pristine bowl with a pristine cup, pristine spoon, the whole 9 yards. When he leaves no tip at all. And the customer, they become incensed and they say, "Mr. Mukashi, Zen master, you forgot to leave a tip." They were expecting, $200 times 10. And he says, "You got your tip yesterday. Goodbye."
You grasped it
A
yesterday.
beautiful parable. I don't know how it connects. It just came to mind, though.
You grasped it yesterday. Now you must recollect.
Because the Zen master was not in that moment. He was not distracted. He was not tied to that scene. His experience was expansive enough to encompass the fact that he could come back. And he was perceptive enough to know that if he left the tip now, that he would receive the kind of treatment he got the next day. So he was treating those 2 days as an entire experience, whereas they were stuck grasping day by day.
On a Platonic reading of the Buddhist scripture, what is the issue is not an answer, as we're used to thinking of answers, but the content, and that's the meaning of the answer. And we could say that the real issue is therefore the underlying question, the problem, the world of problems that underlies the answer, any answer for that matter, insofar as we distinguish between answers and questions. Yeah? As I think we have to, given the condition that we're in. So, well, who is this I? What is this I? What is the nature of this I? There's this old story, I may have mentioned this in one of our conversations, story of Indra and Prajapati, Indra being the god. This was before humans were on earth. There was a city of demons and a city of gods. And news spread that whoever knows the self will be the ruler of the world. And so Indra goes as a representative of the gods. Demon goes to Prajapati, the Lord of the universe, to ask him, well, how do we know what the self is? And so they go through a whole journey. The demon is satisfied with the first answer, appearances. So the self is of the order of an answer, that which is given. Fine. So he goes back to the city of demons and he shares this great news and he says, well, what we are is a given. And the given is a point of reference for growth, development, progress. So grasping in Buddhist terms. Now, Indra is not satisfied with that. Whereas in the city of demons, the answer is accepted and everyone lives as if we were simply out to outpower others. And so everyone is a grasper. What I grasp, something that I grasp away from someone else, necessarily. And so it is a city of lovers of power. The
Radioactive.
Lovers,
It's
yes.
radioactive.
radioactive. Their god is Dagon.
If you think of people as atoms, it's a radioactive substance. There's no coherence. There's no, because
It could melt.
nothing.
It is a city of demons.
Yeah, people don't settle into structures, into rely, and they don't rely on one another. They don't settle into a state of
one another simply, shall we say, in cunning terms.
exactly
As masks.
exactly as billiard balls to bounce off one another for strategic reasons.
Yes, yes.
And who cares where the other balls go unless you need them later?
Yes. So it's either I'm using you or you using me, or we use each other, and so either you get me or I get you. So it's only master or slave, nothing other. Yeah, I take advantage of you or you take advantage of me, but there's no alternative. Yeah, there's no third option. Indra is not satisfied with this, so Indra goes back and he questions, he unpacks that answer that was given, that you are your appearance. And he goes through it and he says, well, you are what is said, not your appearance, but you are that which, and I'm paraphrasing, that self that is within speech. So it's a given in speech. And then he's still not satisfied with it. And in the story, finally, he goes back for 40 years. Yes, this is the training, 40 years in deep meditation in the forest. And then at the end of these other 40 years, well, these are gods, they live a long time. And at the end of the 40 years, he does not go back to Prajapati to ask again, what is this I? For, as the story has it, he has become Prajapati. In other words, at the bottom of this I, there is Prajapati, and he has opened up this self, this I, to the extent that Prajapati is manifest at the bottom of this abyss of the self. So he has no need to go and ask, because the given is the question. The given is somehow burned out. And
can you give examples of it? Can you make this like more tangible in any way?
It lets its foundation speak for itself.
I'm not getting it yet. I'm sorry, but I'm just not.
What is there anything in particular, or everything equally?
Let me try. In the situation where everyone is out for themselves, explain what the bottom is. What do you mean by the bottom?
Well, think of a well, a bottomless well. Yes? You look into the well and you see, well, reflections. These reflections appear to you to be on the surface. I mean, just where you look. I mean, when you look at the sky, where is the sky? For very brutish people, the sky is the roof over your head. That's your sky. For babies, that's what it is. For the ancients, it's where the clouds are, or perhaps where the mountain top is.
As the Polish proverb goes, if a chef were to cook even a housefly, he would save the heart for himself. Meaning, like, in acts of charity, of acts of serving, of service to others, there's always a little piece, that little juicy center, the heart, which is withheld by the one who serves. It's a kind of, it's a sort of a cynical statement in a way, but it means, like, that human nature is that way, that even when we are acting in ways that are very kindly and giving towards others and non-grasping towards others, there's always an element. There's always that tiny little center. There's always an element of withholding, of grasping, that is hard to completely eradicate in the human soul, which is why it's so hard to attain to perfection. Which, if I make some real rough stab at returning to what you were saying and allowing you to return to your points, might be something like, in this world of demons, the reason this thing opens up bottomlessly is because the human capacity to withhold, to be untrue, is kind of bottomless. That knows no limits. That can't be. Something like that.
What about Socrates?
What about him?
Is that not always the question?
Isn't that
Well,
a fine point of reference?
Well, that's why I said it was a little cynical, because you could point to Christ or Socrates or people who do seem to.
It's okay. You're altruistic, but really you keep the heart for yourself. Yeah. In other words, you're altruistic for selfish purpose reasons. Yeah. Yeah, but this is assuming, in fact, that there's no such thing as philosophy in Platonic terms. This is assuming that that the Buddhist question is mute, namely that precisely the self, yeah, this Atma is not a question.
Well, what did Christ say? He said that the greatest man who ever lived was Saint John the Baptist, but that those who are born after his sacrificial offering at Calvary were greater. And so John the Baptist, he's like Abraham is a prototype for Saint John the Baptist. He's like a second Abraham because his parents are all aged and elderly when he's born. He kicks in the womb when the visitation occurs. He goes out into the desert, he eats wild locusts and honey, and he makes straight the ways of the Lord. And so that's why, so Christ says that St. John the Baptist is the very paragon of virtue prior to Christ. Socrates being an unknown quantity in first century Israel. Not to poo-poo all of the wonderful, wonderful, wonderful things of Plato and all that, but the point only being that without salvation, the human, without salvation, without sacrifice, without blood, because despite the fact that Socrates takes the hemlock, it's not quite a crucifixion, is it? It's not the same thing. It's not in the same order, because what happened to Socrates was legal under the Athenian code. So Socrates, that's why Socrates, let me finish the point. I might be wrong, but let me finish the point anyway. Which is why Socrates deliberately does not escape, even though he has the opportunity to, because he is abiding and respects Athens, whereas Christ's execution was done in violation of both Roman and Jewish law.
Was it?
Yes, it was.
What was the Roman law that it was violating?
I don't remember all the details, but I listened to a fantastic lecture I could find on it one time.
And what was the Jewish law that it was okay?
There were like 25 different Jewish laws that were broken in the crucifixion of Christ. It was not done legally. It was done extra legally. It was a kangaroo court. If the law had been adhered to as it was on the then Christ would have never been crucified. It was illegal what they did to Christ. Illegal. That's the core difference between Socrates and Jesus.
Okay, but clearly, as it's in the crucifixion, you have an extreme case, a magnification.
But what happened to Christ was cosmic.
Yeah, magnification.
What happened to Socrates? It was not cosmic.
It's a magnification. It's a cosmic magnification of.
Because Jesus is God, and Socrates is not God.
Hi,
Andy.
there is a cosmic
He's
magnification.
also fully man, but
What? Sorry?
he's also fully man. It's a mystery. It's like the core mystery of everything, of the whole faith. But
Well, Chris, in the Gospels, you have a cosmic, I would say, a cosmic magnification of a problem.
yes, I agreed.
A cosmic magnification does not, and of course, Jesus, is not smiling, and Socrates is not crying. So it's a cosmic magnification. One asks, well, what is the audience? Not the same audience, yeah. I'm talking about the story. We have two stories, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Huh?
Yeah.
I mean,
yes,
if you take one as literally, the other one not, that's not fair play.
I'm not doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not,
I mean, there is a message. So the question really is not whether, as I underlined in a recent conversation I had, the question is not whether Socrates, as we know of him, is the historical Socrates or not. That's besides the point. Completely besides.
I'm not saying anything like that. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, we have a message.
Understood.
Yeah? We have a character. We have a personnage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? And we ask, what is the message of the story? And clearly, yeah, you're certainly in the right to highlight an important distinction between the hymnal and the crucifixion.
Right.
I emphasize that we have here not, however, an essential discrepancy, but a discrepancy that has to do with audience, which has to do with the type of account, which has to do with magnification.
Yes.
A cosmic magnification that entails, obviously, by necessity, a different way of different appearance. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, can I just say, I don't think.
I mean, what is man? Yeah, is the question. And again, I'm returning to this problem of the self. If we want to take that seriously, that is to say, philosophically, to leave it at saying, I will be selfishly altruistic, which is to say, altruistic in a modern way, in Kant's way, for example, an enlightened selfish man. Yeah, then we are, in effect, eclipsing the whole path of classical philosophy. The separation between thought and action is untenable for Socrates. Now, there's something very strange about Socrates and the Platonic account of Socrates, indeed of all classical ancient accounts of Socrates, to the point where the Stoics and later Stoics would consider Socrates a kind of god, right? There is indeed something mysterious about it, and I think this has to do with this, or sometimes we relate it to the problem of the aporetic dialogue. There's a dialogue that points almost asymptomatically to an answer, and it does not offer you an answer, nothing you can grasp and say, aha, now we will establish a new world, a new bright and new and brave world on the basis of this answer that we have been able to grasp, extrapolate from the dialogues. We can't do that. Can't do that. And that is because in an important sense, Socrates points toward the afterlife.
Yeah. Yes.
However you want to, afterlife here, I mean it in the commonsensical respect that, that Socrates speaks about what happens to him afterwards. He says, I'm going to be probably entertaining wonderful conversations with the dead. And then you have other authors who came after Socrates who wrote dialogue with the dead or among the dead or of the dead in a somewhat satirical, humorous way. that, if taken platonically or seriously, could be suggesting that in fact all real dialogue, in fact Socrates himself was dead and he was just pretending to be alive. And he came around and said, what would a dead man pretending to be alive? Would he cry if they gave him hemlock?
Right. I see your point. I see your point. I see your point.
What's the point, of crying? I'm going,
Right,
hey,
right.
you think you're killing me? I'm already dead. What's the
He's
point?
let go of hope then.
Let go of hope suggests there in Dante, and I've written about this, suggests that people are clinging on to irrational hopes. If you want to go through the underworld, and let us not be fooled by this hell translation, it is hell, but only very provisionally for Dante. It is the underworld of what we face in our daily life.
Yeah.
If you want to explore the underworld of our daily life, you have to really let go of that hope. You have to learn how to live without that hope. Yeah. Okay, so perhaps we can have a conference on precisely this old question of the distinction between Socrates and the Christ. But I think that what is primarily pertinent, to the formal topic of our conference is this problem of the self here. Who is speaking? And is the self ultimately something of this world or not? Of this world, in the terms of the Gospels, means of the order of answers, of things that are grasping or can be grasped. Or is this self not of another world, and thus something, and I say something in this sense, that is entering this world, is coming through this world, and is going back to where it came from.
I had a question about that as well.
Now,
I'll let you finish though. That reminds me of another question I had that I forgot to ask in the comments, but I'll let you finish first. Or
this is to say that that what is human is not self-evident. Is man something other than God? Is God something other than man? And what is the proper original relation between these two terms? For the ancients and pagans, it is clear that the gods are the masters and men are slaves that are sons. So the word man, of course, is human, humus, the son of the earth, and men. When do we first speak of men? Men in relation to gods. Yeah.
That if there was a conference, I have a pretty clear notion of what I'd like to write it on, and of one other person I'd like to invite. I'm friends with this Oratorian priest who is a Girard scholar, and I've read all the books of René Girard as well. And we were talking Girard the other day, and he had this incomplete paper he was thinking about presenting at the Colloquium for the Violence and the Sacred, and it involves the issue that Girard never really completed his own theory regarding the issue of the sacrifice of the Mass. He at one point he renounced certain aspects of sacrifice in Catholic theology, and then he realized he said he was wrong, So he renounced his renunciation, but then he never went back fully and like went through the source text and completed his own theory the way it thoroughly must now, and according to my friend, be completed. Whereas personally, I think I would want to present on a couple different essays by Jay Haley, and some stuff that I'm more familiar with regarding aspects of psychopathology in the present context. But anyway, that's sort of an aside. Just because I feel like things are kind of winding down. I might be wrong about that. But I'd also like to just finally say that I think I might have misinterpreted the parable of the house fly, because when it comes to like Poland and Polish wisdom, it's very tricksy. Like like the Polish people, like they very famously had a plan to land on the sun in the interwar period, and everyone said that they like a manned mission to the sun would burn up in the sun's atmosphere. But then, of course, they said they were going to go at night and it would be okay. But I'm part Polish, so the stupid part I get away with. But the thing about the housefly might simply be that it's not a cynical remark at all. It's just, maybe, I don't know. It could be any number of things, but maybe the chef isn't so greedy, isn't so cynical as all that, and it doesn't have to have the interpretive gloss I gave it. Like the myth of Ur, a parable is a parable because, in a way, it's better that way, unexplained.
The Straussian chef cook.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, this is, of course, the big question and the long belabored question of the relation between the aporetic discussion and the mythos, and the mythoi, the stories that Plato tells. And, if, consider it this way, there are images, and then there's the elaboration of the image. There's the given, and then the opening up of the given, of the present, of the gift. And it seems to me that Plato is articulating this dynamic between these two poles, and is inviting us to live that dynamic. The story is clearly to be interpreted, and Socrates offers, invites a path of interpretation, of opening up, of, again, ironic and not autonomous in Kantian terms or in modern terms, Cartesian terms. It's not an interpretation that is symbolically abstracted from out of problems. But it unfolds and lives at the heart of problems in the street, and allows for the hemlock. He is not in his Cartesian resort. So okay,
Cartesian resort.
I'm not sure. It's not, the image is not the end of the story. It's not that you have dialogue, and at the end of the dialogue you have the image. And that's all you can have. Oh, poor Plato! He wasn't able to give us more than an image.
I know
a dream of the other world, or the ultimate reality. And I would suggest that no, that is not, in fact, what is going on. What is going on is that he is offering us an image and a path of interpretation. So he's inviting us to interpret that image and somehow return to this, which we could call a riddle, namely the fundamental matrimony of image and interpretation. So that the fundamental answer is a question. Okay? It is not a grasper or something grasped. It is not of that nature. The fundamental self, again, to return to the typical Buddhist terms, which again are not autonomous of the prior tradition of legal and jurisprudential tradition. The self is ultimately not to be negated or affirmed. Am I a man or am I a god? That kind of thing, yeah? And Christianity is a riddle of sorts, yeah? Because it says, well, God, man, yeah? There are these two dimensions, and the divine dimension is revealed not among men, or maybe among men, but it's not recognized by men necessarily. And if it is revealed among men, it must be revealed in human terms, in terms of a promise. And how are you to trust this man? How are you to trust him? Is he God? And
Of course, there's
the tradition speaks about him as the true human being. Is he a model? I will tell you something about Christianity. Something that comes up in an article that I might be publishing soon. Miguel de Cervantes. You're familiar with him. Don Quixote de la Mancha. Don Quixote de la Mancha. Well, who is this hero? This unarmed, in effect, innocuous, harmless hero. He is a kind of dream. Yeah, he lives in a dream. He's not really a real hero, as Moses might be, as Caesar or Achilles, Achilles might be. And yet, he inspires Sancho, his faithful Sancho, to recognize himself as vile, as Christians we would say, as a sinful man, as a base man, and to repent. There is something that is not of the order of the dream in this Don Quixote de la Mancha. He is the image of heroism, but this image inspires us to recognize our baseness and to recover a path leading to a heroism, shall we say, a heroism that is accessible to man as man. Now, what kind of heroism, real heroism, is accessible to man as man? Not that of Don Quixote de la Mancha, who's dreaming of these medieval chivalry stories. Not that. That is understood to be an illusion. There's a different kind of heroism that is accessible to man as man, and that we're awakened to by the earlier illusory type of heroism. And I think it is clear that this other real accessible type of heroism is the heroism of Cervantes.
That's right.
The heroism.
That's right. That's absolutely right. We just said, that's right.
The heroism of Socrates is accessible to man as man. Now, it just so happens that Cervantes his story is, in an important sense, about Christianity. It offers us a cosmic magnification of heroism that invites us to recognize that we had abandoned, and Dante speaks about abandoning, and he is speaking about really abandoning our proper telos, and recovering it. And that telos points to the mystery of Dante.
You already touched on this partly, the question of the human and the divine. So let's say in life you are a mask, you know you are someone because you have these hopes, these fears, yeah, your body. I wonder whether uh, at the end, whether we are someone in our source, or is it there is a logos that speaks through us, but when there is no mask, well, what is us? What am I? That's I don't know. There seems to be, oh, all right, the question being, so who in the afterlife am I? Who are we as individuals now? There seems to be it seems more obvious in the case of the eschaton, yes, the resurrection of the body. uh,
Ah, ah,
that's something I wanted to point to before,
yes.
that there will be a new body. uh,
Okay, but okay, let me just,
is
before we go on tangents here, address that issue.
Mhm.
How are we to understand the resurrection of the body? Is it something that is alien from Plato, or is it, again, a formulation that is giving us, in effect, a cosmic magnification of what we find in Plato? Let me put it this way. Is the resurrection of the body uh, suggesting that the body is not in itself, as a resurrection of the body suggests, in Platonic terms, that the body is already something other than itself. I mean, there's a sense in which the body is returning to its source, you could say. Yeah? What is it resurrecting is the perfection of the body. But what is the perfection of the body for Plato? It is the idea of the body,
Mm.
the perfection of the body. So, is there a resurrection? Where is the body redeemed? It's redeemed in its original perfection. And there again, you take the mask off, the old mask, again with Paul, right? When I was a child, I cared about things that didn't matter. Now I'm a grown up and I care about things that do matter. How do you account for that proposition uh, in relation to the question of the resurrection of the body? Clearly, it is not a question of saying, hey, I have a little crummy body, now I want a super body. How do we understand, the final judgment of Michelangelo in those terms? You see the skin that the guy is holding, that would be the skin that was ripped off um, Michelangelo's own skin, and the Christ, Apollo, right, standing in judgment. Is that the resurrection of the flesh? Is Michelangelo to be found um, in the flesh, that were in the skin that was ripped off, or in the Apollo? Is that Michelangelo himself redeemed, resurrected? Huh? Okay, so I don't see a necessary, in fact, fundamentally, I don't see any discrepancy between the Platonic lesson and the appeal to the resurrection of the flesh. Does that address your question?
Did you ask me, does it address my question?
Yeah.
Yes, it does. I think the pointing to the idea, eidos of the body in Plato is a good answer to that question. Don't know that it settles it because I'm kind of out of my depth with it. Um, Wanted to, I mostly brought it up to see whether there's anything to my suspicion there. But this is something that bears more study. I think it's a good place to start for me.
Yes, and platonically, is the future is a kind of image of something fundamental, and
Hmm.
in non-philosophical terms, we expect something to come up later that is already here. And prophecy is not, in this respect, a guessing of what is going to happen,
It's a revelation. It's an apocalypse.
but it's about seeing what is somehow divinely already there.
Mm-hmm.
So we have fulfillment of promises. What will come is the unmasking. The unmasking. Now, yes, question of whether our life, our choices, our liberty, has any importance. Does that change anything with respect to a preordained order? Because you can raise that question. Does it really?
As I did in the comments earlier.
Yes.
Right. In that respect, also, I guess the painting, the Michelangelo painting, comes up again because there's conversation, right?
Yes. 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 Clearly, there's debate going on.
Yeah.
And as I suggested somewhere, that is a kind of summary of shall we say, a homage to Dante, to Dante's comedy. There is for Dante not a resolution in the heavens. I've discussed this in writing. I will keep doing it. There is a cosmic magnification of sorts, and not a resolution of problems in the heavens, Paradiso. So there in Michelangelo, we have people still debating, and they're still prudent. They're still careful. They still have to be concerned about. There are still problems, basically.
Yeah, there's still justice. Let's say
clearly. Okay.